Junk food. It gets its name for a reason, right? It's something that isn't good for you and it doesn't have any place in your diet. It's linked with obesity and a variety of health problems, and there are attempts to either ban it, ban advertising, or at the very least put a heavier tax on it. But what if it wasn't quite as simple as that? What if the problem isn't actually with junk food, but something else which is far more important? In this episode, we're going to uncover the truth about junk food and how it isn't quite as bad as it seems. Hey, and welcome to Vegetarian Health and Longevity, the podcast where we cover amazing topics that help vegetarians live longer in better health. I'm your host, James LeBague, and I get to interview expert guests and also share my own experiences working as a sports nutritionist and as an advanced clinical practitioner in family medicine. I've heard so many people mention about their struggles with junk food, how it's caused them to become overweight, how it's created bad eating habits for them, or how they feel hooked on it and unable to stop themselves from eating more. I had a client who came to me asking for help with their nutrition, with the goal of improving the quality of their diet and to lose weight. In their mind, junk food was having a significant impact on their ability to follow the diet that they wanted to, and was derailing their attempts at losing weight. My client's understanding of junk food was the same as why most health experts warn against its consumption. It usually has added sugar and fat, and it contains sodium. It's usually hyperpalatable, meaning it's easy to consume a lot of it. Couple that with the other downsides to typical junk food. It's usually low in protein and low in fiber, and if you regularly eat food that is lacking in these two, then that's a recipe for disaster. Protein and fiber both act on the satiety mechanism, and low amounts of these mean that you're less likely to feel full and satisfied after eating. Then you've also got the issue that junk food often looks, smells, and tastes good too, meaning that you want more of it. There are heaps of warnings that eating lots of junk food will lead to obesity and a whole host of other health problems associated with that. And when I analysed my client's diet, they definitely did have junk food in it, and fairly frequently. But that wasn't actually their problem. We're going to come back to this client later in the episode when we've delved a little deeper into this. But before that, what does junk food even mean? If you look in dictionaries, you'll find some variation of these two definitions. 1. Food that is high in calories but low in nutritional content. 2. Something that is appealing or enjoyable but of little or no real value. Now, I'd kind of agree with this, but for me, it lacks the thing that is way more important, and that's context. People tend to generalize food into two camps, healthy and unhealthy, or good and bad. They see it as a black and white scenario, where they've done something wrong if they eat the unhealthy food, of which junk food falls into. But this misses a lot of information and can lead to really negative mindsets around food. Instead, I'd suggest food be seen as somewhere on a spectrum of how nutritious it is. So yeah, some food like typical junk food might not be that nutritious because it will probably be lacking in vitamins and minerals and not much fiber or protein. And other food might have loads of vitamins and minerals and be super nutritious. But one is not necessarily better than the other, and this is where context comes in, because it's your overall dietary quality and eating habits which matter more. And on top of this, different foods and preferences can align to different goals. A really good example of what I'm talking about here are two people who lost weight with very different diets. The first was a guy called Kevin McGuinness, and he lost 58 pounds over 100 days by only eating McDonald's. Your typical junk food led to a huge amount of weight loss. Then take Mark Haub, a man who lost 27 pounds in 2 months by eating Twinkies, Oreos, Doritos, and sugary cereals. Again, not your classic healthy, nutritious diet, but he was able to lose a significant amount of weight. These are extreme examples, but I'm using them to make a point of context and how scenario-specific food is. Now, I wouldn't recommend either of these approaches for the average person looking to lose weight because there are definitely better ways to do it which are more nutritious and healthier. But the benefits they gained from losing weight are probably going to be far greater in the long term, which is then a net positive thing, rather than looking specifically at the food they ate, calling it junk food and saying it's unhealthy. So now, to make it more relatable, consider how much junk food you actually consume in relation to the rest of your diet. How much is junk food and how much is healthier, nutritious food? Because if most of your diet is genuinely healthy, unprocessed food, fruits, vegetables, and whole grain carbohydrates, the chances are that junk food is not going to be as much of an issue as you think. Think back to the weight loss examples. You can lose weight by eating any food. So if you're not losing weight, then there's a mismatch of how many calories you're consuming versus how many calories you're expending. Now, junk food factors into this, of course. It's made with enticing packaging, with colourful designs and mouth-watering slogans. Their marketing is designed to make you want it, to think about it and tempt you to purchase it. This is a whole topic in itself, and we could go on a bit of a tangent about this, but I'm willing to bet that when people say junk food is their problem and it's stopping them from achieving their goals, that there are other, deeper, more important factors at play. By the way, if you're interested in following the vegetarian diet but don't know where to start, you can download a free meal plan at hurrythefoodup.com/try. That's TRY. We've planned out a delicious week's worth of meals and included a grocery list to make it as easy as possible for you. So head to hurrythefoodup.com/try to download your plan and experience the awesomeness of our veggie recipes. Lots of people feel bad when they eat junk food, or at least they do after a couple of minutes after finishing their last mouthful. Regret, unhappiness, frustration. I've heard this all too often from clients who have this very negative aftermath from eating junk food. This is where it becomes so important to start exploring the relationship with food with them, and I'd ask you to do the same. This requires honesty, and it can sometimes be a little tough, but I promise you it's worth it, so stick with me. What is it that makes someone feel bad after eating junk food? Is it that they just think it's unhealthy and they regret it going into their body? Is it because they're trying to lose weight and they're concerned that this will derail their efforts? And more importantly, what was it that prompted them to eat it in the first place? This is the real question to ask and understand. What drives someone to buy and eat that food? Commonly, people can't answer this. They've never stopped and really asked themselves. They might have a vague idea, but they've never got it out of their own head or given it more than a moment's thought. But if people really want to improve their relationship with food, and in this case junk food, they need to understand themselves. I ask clients to start writing in a journal why they bought and ate junk food. It's not designed to make them feel ashamed or embarrassed, but instead start confronting what's holding them back. Is it because they're bored? Is it because they're genuinely hungry? Is it because they've had a crappy day at work and it's their comfort? Did they have nothing prepared for dinner and it was easier to order a takeaway? This isn't an exhaustive list, but they're examples of the key questions to ask yourself. If you can honestly answer them, then you can start to take positive steps to stop it from happening if it's genuinely a problem for you. So let's say you're genuinely hungry. Start preparing healthy, satisfying snacks that are ready to eat when the cravings come on, instead of opting for junk food. Or if you eat because you're bored, start compiling a list of hobbies or things to do to take your mind off eating. You could meal plan in advance and have dinner already prepared so that you don't have to do it after a long day. These are specific to you, and it's about getting honest. I always encourage clients to understand that there's no guilt or blame with this process. Why should you feel like that when you've never confronted it before? You wouldn't think so badly of yourself when you're trying to learn something for the first time, so why should you with this? But it's not all bad, and I don't want it to seem like I'm being negative about junk food, because as we'll explore, I think there are some real positives to including this junk food in your diet. At the beginning of this episode, we broadly defined what junk food is, but I want to go a little deeper on that, because this is what really opens this topic up. So we know that junk food doesn't have that much in the way of vitamins and minerals, fiber or protein, and instead there are usually 3 nutrients which are included, which, depending on context, aren't ideal. These are simple carbohydrates, sodium, and saturated fat. Let's take a standard sized chocolate bar that you might buy. So this could be a Snickers, a Mars bar, or similar. It's going to contain around 250 calories, 25 grams of carbohydrates, of which most are simple carbohydrates or sugars, 12 grams of fat, of which around 5 grams are saturated fat, and around 0.25 grams of salt, which is about 0.1 gram or 100 milligrams of sodium. Now, for a bit of context here, the average adult should be consuming around 2,000 calories per day if they're following government guidance of regular exercise. The max advised daily limit for saturated fat is no more than 10% of your calorie intake, which would work out as around 22 grams, no more than 30 grams of free sugars, and maximum around 6 grams of salt per day. So this chocolate bar is getting kind of close to the max amount of free sugars. But overall, when you look at the nutritional value, it's not absolutely awful in the sense of it's not blowing all those numbers out of the water. And this is where the overall quality of your diet becomes so important. If the rest of your diet is healthy, with minimal added sugars, salt or saturated fat, then a chocolate bar, if you're within your recommended daily calorie intake, is not going to make everything go horribly wrong. And let's be honest, chocolate or whatever junk food is your vice tastes great. There's a reason people eat it. It tastes good and it hits the right senses. And this is something I always talk about with the clients that I work with. Like my client I mentioned at the start, they'll often feel guilty for eating junk food, and I ask them why. Why do they feel guilty for eating something which, in isolation in an otherwise healthy diet, isn't causing them much trouble and is something they genuinely enjoy? Usually, when people deny themselves something, the desire gets stronger. And certainly when it comes to typical junk food, it's then a very negative cycle. Crave it, deny it, give in and splurge, feel upset and shamed, and then at some point, this process repeats. My argument is that, for most people, they are far better off indulging in it occasionally and really enjoying it. Now, I don't mean to say that it should be an everyday thing, because it probably shouldn't be, but accepting it as part of your diet and being at peace with it leads to such a better relationship with your food. On top of that, if you actually allow yourself to do this, then you'll generally find a much better consistency with your diet over the long term, because you're able to really enjoy your food and lifestyle because you've included those things that you like to have as a treat. In my opinion, way too many people get caught up with the idea of being super strict with their diet or try to push those views onto others. And this is actually counterproductive in the long run and creates a toxic relationship with food. But there's another reason why I think understanding more about the context of junk food is key. I mentioned that they typically contain simple sugars, which are carbohydrates in a readily absorbable form. And these are actually fantastic for exercise. I work with everyday keep fit athletes as well as professional athletes who are pushing performance. Regardless of their level, I talk to them about using sports gels, sports drinks, and yes, typical junk food like chocolate bars or gummy sweets. Your body uses a simple sugar called glucose to power a heck of a lot of its activity. And around exercise is one of the times where high fiber, whole grain carbohydrates aren't actually as beneficial, because they can increase the risk of gastrointestinal upset when exercising, and they take longer to digest and release the energy. So if people just demonize junk food, on the whole, they're actually missing the nuance and benefits of some of the components of it without even realizing. Before, during, and after exercise is a brilliant time to consume typical junk food because of how well it's absorbed and tolerated by the body. So for example, if I have a client who really enjoys a certain junk food, I might give them a suggestion to eat it during a long cycle ride or before their run, because it actually works really well for providing energy. And what I'd love to do is propose the idea of context-specific junk food. It sounds so catchy, right? But really, understanding that junk food is not inherently bad, and it's how it fits in context that dictates where on the sliding scale of healthy and unhealthy that it fits. With all that said though, there is a reason why junk food is difficult to stop eating. And some people have a real struggle with stopping themselves eating a lot of it. And a chocolate bar becomes a daily chocolate bar, or maybe even two. And then it's either stopping them from achieving their goals like weight loss, or instead making them put on weight? If that's the case, what strategies can you employ to help you get past this? One of them is what I mentioned earlier, about incorporating them into your diet and accepting it. Again, if possible, this shouldn't be a daily thing, but it's about understanding yourself and giving yourself some leniency and time to change. Habits aren't changed overnight, and instead they're formed over weeks and months. By accepting the struggles and allowing yourself a bit of freedom to enjoy food and starting to follow healthier habits, you're going to reduce the risk of binge eating and negative cycles later on. Then I'd look at what it is that you're eating and see if there are any simple swaps that you could make. So for example, swapping full sugar soda for diet soda. Lots of people get hung up on this and say that artificial sweeteners are bad for you, and that's a podcast episode for another day. But the short story here is that in randomized controlled trials investigating the weight loss effects of zero sugar soda drinks, they are clearly beneficial. So if weight loss is your goal, this might be an easy swap and win that you can make with your diet. Another option is to include high protein, high fiber, high satiety foods in your diet. High protein and high fiber foods increase satiety, which means you'll feel fuller and more satisfied when you eat them. This should then reduce the risk of cravings and help you to stay on track with your diet. This is actually the ethos that we follow at Hurry the Food Up, and our meal plans contain recipes which are higher in protein and fiber to increase that satisfied feeling with your meals. You can download a free vegetarian meal plan at hurrythefoodup.com/try. That's TRY, and check out how filling but delicious a vegetarian diet can be. Another tool which I encourage clients to practice is to journal and track their feelings in relation to food. Writing down your emotions and stresses in a diary can be incredibly powerful because getting it out of your head and onto paper allows you to start processing it and really understanding it. It's one of those things that if you really want to get to grips with and improve your relationship with food, you actually have to acknowledge, and for a lot of people that can be scary. But often, once they start journaling, it's not as bad as it first seemed, and they can start to see clear links between their emotions and their food habits. Then they can start to take steps to change this and take control back into their own hands. If you've struggled with your relationship with food and have never done this before, then I'd absolutely encourage it because it can be so revealing. Keep it positive and remember the aim is to learn and improve. And don't make it negative or fall into that blame trap. Finally, it's worth having a strategy at the time for when cravings for junk food are at their highest and you don't want to eat it. For example, doing some painting, doing a crossword, reading your favorite book, something that allows you to zone in on something else and lets you break that craving cycle. A lot of cravings are habitual, and being able to change that pattern is really important. But once you do, it becomes so much easier. It might be that you employ a combination of everything I've been through, and if so, then that's great. I think that the more insight you have into what works for you, the better, as long as it's all seen through a positive lens. Remember that the most important thing here is context. Don't just demonize a food because of its label, like junk food. There's way more nuance to it than that, and what your overall diet is like is far more influential in terms of how healthy it is. Now, if this episode has been useful to you, then please give it a quick rating on whatever podcast provider you're listening on. It'll only take a moment, but it'll help it to spread to more people and help them improve their relationship with food.